Namaste, my name is Janapati Das. Welcome again to the reading of the Shri Ishopanishad as translated and purported upon by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Please accept my respects, everyone. Let me take this opportunity to offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, Jagad Guru, Siddhaswarupananda Paramhamsa Shri Prabhupada, and His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are, of course, approaching this class by reading from the purport and translation by His Divine Grace, but also the purport from His Divine Grace Jagad Guru Siddhaswarupananda Paramhamsa Shri Prabhupada, my dear spiritual master. So we can get both purports. Last time we read from the incantation. An incantation, of course, this is prayer, an invocation, invoking the idea that Krishna is the source, is the Supreme Personality of God, complete and perfect, not possible to be fragmented or broken apart, and all the energies and emanations coming from Him are complete in of themselves. So that is the basis for the Shri Ishopanishad, and all other 18 mantras that we will read through have to do with that and are connected to that incantation. So we will start with some hearing and chanting of Krishna's names. So please join along. Namo Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa Namine Gaurakaruna Swarubaya Krishna Pristayate Namo Haribol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. For my respectful obeisances unto. So we are starting from Mantra 1. This is the Shri Ishopanishad. This particular book is purported upon by His Divine Grace. Now, the Upanishads are religious texts, and there are numerous, I think 108 total of Upanishads, and the Shri Ishopanishad is considered to be the cream of the highest jewel of the Upanishads. We oftentimes will quote different Upanishads, such as the Svetasvatara Upanishad, which is the primary one that we also read from. Last time we read the invocation. I'm just going to read the purport again of this invocation. Maybe I'll say it every time because it's an invocation, so therefore it is the epitome, the essence of the Shri Ishopanishad, and is reflected in all of the 18 pearls, right? These 18 pearls make this great necklace of Vedic wisdom. The personality of Godhead is perfect and complete, and because He is completely perfect, all emanations from Him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as a complete whole. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete by itself, and because He is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from Him, He remains the complete balance. So we had discussed this last time, that Krishna, unlike the monist philosophy that argues that the Supreme has split Himself up into multi-fragmental parts that are the living entities in this material world. And the idea is to try to unify those through meditation, whereas the Vaishnavas reject this concept. The sages and the scripture themselves also reject this idea that, and here it is said in the Upanishad, Shri Ishopanishad, that Krishna is perfect and complete. And even if He has so many emanations coming from Him, He remains complete and balanced. This is Mantra 1. Ishvashyamidam sarvam yat kincha Jagad yam Jagad tena tyaktena punjita magrida kashya shridanam. Isha, by the Lord, vashyam, controlled, idam, this, sarvam, ya, all, yat, whatever, kim, it is, cha, and, jagat yam, within the universe, jagat, all that is animate or inanimate, tena, by Him, tyaktena, set apart quota, punjitaha, you accept, ma, do not, gridaha, make into use, kashasvid, whom does it belong, tandanam, things necessary. Translation, Mantra 1. Everything animate or inanimate that is within this universe, within the universe, is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one must not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So this is a wonderful mantra. This verse is it's one verse that I reference frequently, with the understanding that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, is the source of all things animate and inanimate. So many emanations come from Him, and He is perfect and complete. And therefore, all animate and inanimate things within this universe is controlled and owned by Krishna. And it is a reminder that the living entities accept what those things necessary for themselves are, what is their quota. And every living entity who comes into this material world has a certain type of quota. We shouldn't, Srila Rupa Goswami has also stated in his Nectar of Instructions, one should not over endeavor for things, for material things, and or what is given to them. It's a similar argument here that in this world we are given a certain quota, usually through our karmic reactions, and whatever we receive is the mercy of Krishna. It is a gift and an opportunity to be able to use and serve in the service of Krishna. And we have to understand, and we must not accept other things, knowing well to whom we belong. This over endeavoring for things is led to great suffering in this world, because people act as thieves, not only of other people but of Krishna. They over strive, they cheat, they try to get so many material things, thinking that this is going to accumulate. This accumulation is going to make them happy. So this is a wonderful verse. It's a great one to meditate upon, and we'll read Bhaktivedanta's purport. The Vedic knowledge is infallible because it comes down through the perfect disciplic succession of spiritual masters, beginning with the Lord himself. The Vedic knowledge is received from the transcendental sources, and the first word was spoken by the Lord himself. The words spoken by the Lord are called aparusheya, not delivered by any person of the mundane world. So the Vedic knowledge is received from Krishna through various means. The scriptures, the Vedas, everything is for a particular purpose and use. They are complete in themselves. Some things are not necessary, as we've read through the Bhagavad Gita, are not necessary for devotees who are interested in dovetailing their relationship with Krishna. They might be for people who have more interest in the rules and regulations, certain kinds of karmakanda sections of the Vedas that are for people who want to enjoy in the material world, but yet Krishna provides them an opportunity to regulate their behaviors. But nevertheless, this absolute truth is not created by anybody. The knowledge that we accumulate a lot of times in this material world is created by other living beings who are conditioned. Therefore, they have high defects in them. And this is what Bhaktivedanta talks about, which is also stated in different scriptures. A living being of the mundane world has 4 defects, which are: number 1, he must commit mistakes. Number 2, he must sometimes be illusion. Number 3, he must try to cheat others. And number 4, he's endowed with imperfect senses. So, mistakes, we make mistakes, we are illusioned, we try to cheat, and we have imperfect senses. So breaking those down in a real practical sense, you can apply this to anything. First of all, we make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. We're constantly making mistakes. We make mistakes in our measuring of things, because this is the tendency of the conditioned living entity to make mistakes. We're not perfect. We're not Krishna. So anybody who judges other people would have to realize that we all make mistakes. You must sometimes be illusioned. So we're constantly being illusioned. We think things are one thing or another. You go to movies and they create this illusion that fool people into thinking the plot is a certain kind of way. And this is the sort of genius of directors and movies. But we can see this applied in many situations. We're illusioned by sometimes at nighttime we may think we see something coming out of and it looks like maybe an animal or whatnot, but it's just a dumpster, and the nighttime the darkness is creating an illusion that it's a monster coming through, or there's a car, or somebody's walking by. we think it's a dog, or, so this happens all the time. We're all often illusioned. So you can think of a lot of examples of how we are illusioned because of what is the fourth one, but we'll get to that in a second. So we try to cheat others, and because our tendency to not recognize the idea that Krishna is the owner and controller of all things, and we have a certain quota, we try to cheat to get more. And you can see this from everywhere, from the youngest to the oldest. They cheat. Kids will lie about things. I teach middle school, and what the kids do is they just look at things just like we used to do. They have to do certain steps to follow to try to figure out how to get the information, but instead they just look at their friend's paper without realizing that the information of how to get the information is important and will be on a test further on. But they just think, I need to get an A. I don't want to get an F because these bad things will happen to me, and it's better for me to get an A because then my mom will let me have candy or go out in the movies. So I'll just cheat, And we see this in business. We see it in politics. People cheating all the time. They're just they lie about things to try to manipulate and rip off other people. So this happens all over, husbands and wives cheating on each other, right? And we have imperfect senses. So we have a limited amount of senses, and we have, of course, in science, we have sort of extended senses through microscopes and telescopes, but these are not even perfect either. Nothing is perfect. Krishna is perfect, but we do not have the standard. That's why when we point our microscopes down and our telescopes up to the space and the scientists proclaim, we don't see God anywhere. So therefore there is no God. But we don't realize that we're working in a very controlled very controlled, behind the scenes material nature is controlling things, and Mayadevi is controlling things. And even from science point of view, we point things out in the telescope. It's imperfect. It only has a certain kind of ability to do things by the technology that we have. So they come out with a really more powerful telescope, and they've been building this theory about what is out there and what that means. And they have this more powerful telescope, and they just see a completely different picture. And they're like, whoa, everything that we were thinking 50 years ago is actually obsolete and not really true. And even the theories that we were building is gone out the bathtub. We have this, now what? What does this mean? So the more we look into the material nature with our science and our telescopes and microscopes to try to find the absolute truth, the less we know. we can't even fathom. And then we have to speculate. So this comes from the idea of accumulating knowledge, right? And accumulating knowledge in the material world is imperfect because our senses are imperfect. We speculate heavily about the things because we don't really know. For example, we don't really know in science what is consciousness, but the Vedic truth explains that. But the funny thing is that people will often say, how can you prove God, or can you prove what is said in the Vedas as being true? Which is kind of an absurd statement because you have the perfect truth. Veda means knowledge, Veda means truth. And we say, here it is right here in the Bhagavad Gita. Here's what our spiritual masters have said, the real scientists, the spiritual scientists of, pure devotees. And they're like, well, no, but what about, empirical science? It can show that. And we're just telling them that your method, your tools are imperfect. And so therefore you're trying to apply an imperfect statement, science, so-called science, onto a perfect situation. It's like you've got this backwards. It's like trying to, let me find out the absolute truth using a little water. I'm going to take the whole ocean into this little water pincher thing, and that's So this is what we've talked about before. The best thing that material science can do is just assist in trying to talk to people who are materially conditioned about the Vedas. So these are really, really amazing. And I think, if you could write them down, or even I think people should have them on the wall, the four conditions of human nature, and see how they apply to our complete illusion of who we think we are, and why we do the things we do, and why we try to accumulate so much stuff and steal it from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to try to be complete in this invocation, right? To try to be complete. We will never be complete. So we have all these faulty situations that are incomplete, and poor fund of knowledge trying to be complete with an incomplete thing. Even the science itself is incomplete. But the Vedas are complete, as Krishna says. With the four principles of imperfection, one cannot deliver perfect information in the matter of all-pervading knowledge. It's very straightforward. The Vedas are not known like that. The Vedic knowledge was originally imparted into the heart of Brahma, the first created living being, and Brahma, in his turn, disseminated the knowledge to his sons and disciples who have continued the process down through history. So this is the idea of Vedic knowledge. It's handed down from spiritual master to disciple. Even what I'm teaching you here is not something that I'm speculating about or thinking about or trying to read a bunch of different stuff and come up with in my own head about what is the absolute truth. This is way, way, way different than the way people try to understand things. In this, it's through realization, and it's a deeper process, much, much deeper. We have the process of purifying our heart, so that we can realize the self. We can realize the information that's coming through our spiritual masters. It's not something that we're accumulating like they do in the West or do in modern society. We accumulate knowledge, and we like this part, we don't like this part, we take this out. And so we become the greatest authority, the greatest spiritual master of our own world. We're in this relative truth. This is my truth, and this is what I think is reality. This is not how the Vedas work. It's not how disseminating spiritual knowledge works. We receive the information in a descending process. The Lord being Purnam, or all perfect, there is no chance of his being subjected to the laws of material nature. While the living entities and inanimate objects are all controlled by the laws of nature, and thus ultimately by the potency of the Lord, this Ishopanishad is a part of the Yajur Veda, and as such it also contains information as to the proprietorship of all things that exist within the universe. This point is confirmed by the Bhagavad Gita in the 7th chapter, where para and apara prakriti are discussed, the elements of nature, earth, fire, water, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and ego, all belong to the inferior or material energy of the Lord, whereas the living being, the organic energy, is the superior energy, the para prakriti of the Lord. Both the prakritis or energies are emanations from the Lord, and ultimately he is the controller of everything that exists. There is nothing in the universe which does not belong either to the para or the apara prakriti. Therefore, everything is under the proprietary right of the Supreme Being. So, the Supreme Being Krishna is the source of all things superior, the superior spiritual energy and the inferior spiritual material energy are all emanations, and they are all perfect in of themselves, but the material nature is inferior, as stated in the chapter 7, verse 4 and 5, which my spiritual master will talk about also more in depth as well. So this is very self-explanatory, that if you have an inferior energy and you're trying to utilize it to capture or try to understand something that is superior, it doesn't work that way. It's kind of like trying to know calculus with, it's like trying to know calculus by only having a knowledge of basic arithmetic. It's said that calculus is not in basic arithmetic, but basic arithmetic is in calculus. So therefore, the Supreme Being all animate and inanimate things exist, but from the material point of view, or even from the point of view of the living entity who is in a superior energy, is not on the same par as the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being, the absolute personality of Godhead being the complete person, has the complete and perfect intelligence to adjust everything by its different potencies. The Supreme Being is often compared with fire, and everything organic and inorganic is compared with the heat and light of the fire. The fire distributes energy in the form of heat and light, and likewise, the Lord displays his energy in different ways, and he remains the ultimate controller, sustainer, and dictator over everything. You know, that word dictator is kind of like, has a negative connotation, but it really just comes from this word about dictating, right? Basically controlling over things, you know. He is full of all potencies, the knower of everything, the benefactor of everyone, and is full of all inconceivable opulences, power, wealth, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. His inconceivable opulences and potencies, you know, it's just like things we cannot even imagine. We're just kind of blown away by the scratching the surface on the material nature and the things that, when we start hearing about multi-universes emanating from the pores of Mahavishnu and the living entities, and are spread out through these infinite number of universes, and there are different dimensions depending on the Lord Brahma creator. You know, some of the Brahmas have millions of heads, therefore some of the universes have millions of dimensions, are huge, and we have a relatively small universe. Lord Brahma only has 4 heads, so therefore it's 12 or 14 dimensions that the material science is sort of speculating upon right now with the string theory. One should be intelligent enough to know that except for the Lord, no one is a proprietor of anything. One should accept only the things which are set aside by the Lord as his quota. We have to understand this. We have to understand that we really do not own anything. People are not the owners of land. They are not these things have come into their possession because of their karmic reaction. And if you're going to be a thief and you steal, even if you steal all these things and you try to enjoy those things, the karmic reaction to that, material nature will fight back. They will pay you back for that activity of stealing what it is not supposed to be yours, your quota. The cow, for example, gives milk, but she does not drink the milk. Her milk is designated as food for the human being. The cow eats grass and straw, but does not drink her own milk. Such is the arrangement of the Lord, and we should be satisfied with the things that have been very kindly set aside for us by him. We should always consider to whom the things that we possess actually belong. That's a very great and very profound statement, and I think people should reflect upon that. We should always consider to whom the things that we possess actually belong. If you do that, if you're grateful for the things that Krishna has given you to be able to use in his service, you don't lust over other things. You don't get into frustration and anger over what you don't have, or you don't have envy over what other people have, because you know that maybe that in this life they've been given so much, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And many times, as Jesus Christ would say, it's easier for a rich man to go through the eye of a needle than it is, or camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is a rich man to enter the kingdom of God, because this opulence and this wealth is so enticing, and it could just lead you into, you know, just this world of pleasure and temporary pleasure and matters of dollars and cents, and you can completely be distracted from understanding the real meaning of the human form of life. Take, for example, our dwelling house, which is made of earth, wood, stone, iron, cement, and so many other material things. If we think in terms of Shri Ishopanishad, then we must know that we cannot produce any of the above-mentioned building materials ourselves. We can simply bring them together and transform them into different shapes by our labor. A laborer cannot claim to be the proprietor of a thing just because he has worked hard to manufacture it. So we design many wonderful, amazing bridges and buildings and monuments and whatnot, but we don't produce the elements for that. That is already provided to us by God. But we put them into things, but even our strength and our ability and our brain is also gifts from God that have been given to us. The ability to do things. So to say, this is mine, or this is, even if it's like my ability to be a great architect, or my ability to be a powerful man, or my ability, these are just abilities that have come as your karmic reaction, and therefore need to be addressed and focused on as not as mine, but as a gift from Krishna to use in his service. There is always this great quarrel between the laborers and the capitalists in present-day society. The quarrel has now taken an international shape, and the world is in danger. Men face each other in enmity, just like cats and dogs snarling. Yeah, so you see this, played out, the fight for communism or capitalism hasn't really changed. This was the 70s or the 60s, and people thought, if we just make the workers of the world in charge of everything, it'll be okay. We just redistribute our wealth to everybody, that everybody will be happy with that. That's just not true. We've seen this over and over again, actually, where the powerful end up still taking power and creating havoc on the people. And then, capitalists, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, well, we have working, we're going to marginalize our profit, and we got to have more and more money. And so there's problems on both sides. But, ultimately, we have to realize who's the proprietor of all these things that we... Shri Ishopanishad. Okay. Shri Ishopanishad cannot give advice to the cats and dogs, but it delivers the message of Godhead to a man through a bona fide acharyas or holy teachers. And the human race may take this Vedic wisdom from Shri Ishopanishad, that no one should quarrel over material possessions. One must be satisfied by whatever privileges are given to him by the mercy of the Lord. There can be no peace if the communist or the capitalist or any other party claims to be the proprietor of the resources of nature, which are entirely the property of the Lord. And we see this actually playing out in world politics. Ukraine's like, this is my land. Russia is this my land. Israel is this my land. This Palestinians are, this is actually our land. People constantly saying this was my land first, but it's actually nobody's land. It's all God's land. So we can take to heart, and we could actually live peacefully if we understand these concepts. The capitalists cannot curb down the communists simply by political maneuvering, nor can the communists defeat the capitalists simply by fighting for the stolen bread. If they do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then all the property which they claim to be their own is stolen, and therefore they shall be liable to punishment by the laws of nature. The bomb is in the hand of both the communists and the capitalists, and if both do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Lord, it is sure and certain that ultimately the bomb will ruin both parties. So the nuclear war is still a very great threat. Many, many more countries have much more powerful weapons, and we may not be doing a Cold War per se like we did back then, but we have like fundamentalist Islamic societies and other societies in the Western worlds are fighting over, how things should be run. Therefore, in order to save themselves, both must follow the instruction of Shri Ishopanishad and thus bring peace to the world. Human beings are not meant for quarreling like cats and dogs. It's like I decided to break up my cat the other day with fighting with the neighbor's cat, and they're just like, you know, this is what's really going on. You can just open your social media and see, you know, reels of people just fighting, yelling, screaming, cursing out, people fighting against each other, beating their drums, you know, like cats and dogs. They're quarreling over who's got the more material things to try to enjoy. They must be intelligent enough to realize the importance of human life and to realize the aim of human life. So that's missed out on a lot of what's going on in the world today. The point of the human form of life is to understand who you are and what the purpose of your life is in relationship with Krishna, in this loving relationship with Krishna. You must to go back home to Krishna, to live a life simply, and everything is perfectly fine when your consciousness is in the right place. The Vedic literature is meant for humanity and not for cats and dogs. Cats and dogs can kill other animals for food, and for that there is no question of sin on their part. But if a man kills an animal for the satisfaction of his uncontrolled taste buds, he is responsible for breaking the laws of nature and therefore must be punished. The killing of animals is not justified. All right, you know, I was on the bus the other day, and there was this conversation going on with people about Chick-fil-A and how fresh the chicken meat is, and you know, it's like the uncontrollable taste bud, how delicious that is, you know, the satisfaction of that. So we don't eat, but Krishna gives us very clear, and our spiritual masters teach us about what kinds of food we can eat and what we should offer to Krishna as, and we can eat that as prasadam for sustenance. There's a standard of life for human beings which cannot apply to the animals. And another thing, actually, because this imbalance from this overconsumption of things and overconsumption of food for trying to just satisfy our tongue, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada has said many times that most of the diseases in the world come about from an uncontrolled tongue and the stomach, right? From the desire of people to just eat whatever and drink whatever in just not a regulated way. If you're eating just like you would eat here, moderately, you would actually live a healthier life in general, with not getting things like diabetes or heart disease, and you know, so many of the other things that come along with that, gout. And the tiger does not eat rice, wheat, or cow's milk because it has been given a quota of foodstuff in the shape of animal food. Some animals are meat eaters, not humans. There are many animals and birds who are either vegetarian or non-vegetarian, but none of them transgress the laws of nature as they have been ordained by the will of the Lord. And if you see, the reality is that animals don't overconsume like humans do. They just eat what they do, and even they'll eat what's necessary, and that will be it. They don't just like keep eating. Like, I think I'll have some gazelle over here, and you know, some birds over that way, and you know, and finish it off with this and that. There is a strict adherence to the laws of nature, and therefore there is no question of sin for them, nor are the Vedic instructions meant for them. So there's no karmic reaction, because they're acting according to nature, and they're not in a human form of life, so they can't inquire into the absolute truth. Human life alone then is a life of responsibility. We have a responsibility as a human being. It is also wrong to consider that simply by becoming a vegetarian one can save himself from transgressing the laws of nature. Vegetables also have life. So here's the other point. One life is meant to feed another living being, and that is the law of nature. One should not be proud of being a strict vegetarian. The point is to recognize the Supreme Lord. We're vegetarian not because it's a status symbol. We're vegetarian because Krishna tells us what kind of foods he likes to be offered. And that includes no meat, fish, or eggs. but we can drink cow's milk and cheese and plant things and grains, and there's plenty of foods for vegetarians to eat. But it's not like, whoa, I'm a vegetarian, look at that, or I'm a vegan. It's like some kind of standard or something. The animals have no developed consciousness to recognize the Lord, but a human being is sufficiently intelligent to take lessons from the Vedic literature and thereby know how the laws of nature are working and derive profit out of such knowledge. If a man neglects the instruction of the Vedic literature, his life is very risky. Yes. The human being is therefore required to recognize the authority of the Supreme Lord. He must be a devotee of the Lord. He must offer everything to the service of the Lord and partake only of the remnants of foodstuff offered to the Lord. That will make him able to discharge his duty properly. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord directly states that he accepts the vegetable foodstuffs from the hands of a pure devotee. Therefore, a human being should not only become a strict vegetarian, but should also be a devotee of the Lord and offer to the Lord all his food, and only then partake of the prasadam or mercy of the Lord. Such a devotee can properly discharge the duty of human life. Those who do not do so are eating only sins. So we're discussing this actually in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 of the idea of prasadam and offering our food. We only offer our food because Krishna wants certain foods to be offered to him in love and devotion. That's why we're a vegetarian. Not, if Krishna was like, eat meat, then we would be eating meat. But this is what Krishna likes. And thus will be subjected to the different types of distress, which are the results of various sins. The root of sin is deliberately disobedience to the laws of nature. I'll read that again. The root of sin is deliberate disobedience to the laws of nature. So basically, sin is the idea of going against that which is natural by the laws of God, through not recognizing the proprietorship of the Lord. Disobedience to the laws of nature or disobedience to the order of the Lord will bring ruin to the human being. So this is many times in modern society, it's a type of a subdivision of karma that's called vikarma, which is actually sinful activities. They're not even regulated activities that are sense gratification, fruitive activities done under regulations. They are actual sinful activities that create massive karmic reaction. On the other hand, if one is sober and knows the laws of nature without being influenced by unnecessary attachment or abhorrence, he is sure to be recognized again by the Lord and thus become eligible for going back to Godhead, back to the eternal home. So that's amazing purport by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're going to start reading because we're already almost 50 minutes into. I'm going to read my Srila Prabhupada's purport from 18th Pearls of Vedic Wisdom. So, mantra 1. One of the definitions, this is purport by Jagad Guru. One of the definitions of God is that he is the origin of everything, the original cause of all causes. Everything animate, living, and inanimate, non-living comes from him. All energies emanate from him. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord states, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 comprise my separated material energies. Besides this inferior nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is a superior energy of mine, which is all living entities who are struggling with material nature and are sustaining the universe. It's a powerful Bhagavad Gita quote, so that it basically delineates and shows the inferior material energies and the Jivama as one of the superior energies who is struggling with these inferior energies, trying to enjoy them, but also maintaining the universe by this being present in the inferior energy. So that's from Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 4 and 5. Since all energies emanate from the Supreme Lord, everything, both living and the non-living, is his. In this world, people are always fighting over property. They want to stake their claims of ownership on both the living and the non-living. According to the Shri Ishopanishad, these people are like thieves fighting over stolen loot. If we look at the question from the relatively short-term view, we may find it hard to accept that no one is really an owner of anything. Yeah, we find that very hard, and I often tell people this. I said, well, actually, nobody's really the owner of anything except God, because we have something one time, you're a dictator or the controller of a whole empire and power, and then boom, you're like knocked out and you're dead and you're not an owner of anything anymore. But if we adopt the point of view of the Shri Ishopanishad, which sees the universe not in terms of decades, centuries, or even thousands of years, but in terms of many millions of years, then we can understand this point. For example, who owns the moon? Both the Americans and the Russians, for instance, have contemplated mining the moon in order to build artificial planets called space colonies. According to the Shri Ishopanishad, it is God who owns outer space, the earth, and all living beings. A piece of God's property may be controlled to a limited extent by a temporarily powerful man or nation, but in due course, whether over hundreds of years or hundreds of thousands of years, such men die and such nations dissolve. So empires come and go. Can you think of anything, of anyone that has been able to indefinitely keep anything? The fight over God's property causes living beings great distress. Yes. Wars, conflicts constantly between people, broken families, hatred, racism, environmental degradation, so many things. If people could only recognize the truth of this first mantra, that everything and everyone belongs to God, then that is children, all living beings, and that as is children, all living beings have a right to the necessities of their existence, then the world would be at peace. There is enough in the world to fulfill everyone's needs, but not enough to fulfill everyone's greed. Great statement. In some parts of the world, people are dying from severe undernourishment, while in other parts of the world, people are dying from obesity. Yeah, we actually, in America, we have a 60% obesity rate. 60% of the United States are overweight. I mean, obese, actually. I don't even know what there's probably more for overweight. It's very easy to do because of our luxurious first world status, But I've been to many countries, Africa, the Philippines, Asia, and seen severe poverty. I mean, where basically people don't have any food for days, have to go miles for water. They're dealing with sicknesses and things that they can't, where we could just snap our fingers or walk to a clinic and go get it taken care of. They don't have that luxury. By nature's arrangement, a person can eat only a certain amount. This amount depends on the size of his stomach, his ability to digest the food, and so on. An elephant quota is fixed at 100 pounds or so of hay a day. A bird's quota is fixed at a few seeds or a little bit of fruit. A human being's quota is fixed. A man's stomach is limited in size, thus how much he can digest is limited. To eat more than can be digested is sinful. It's explained in that previous Bhaktivedanta's, idea of just basically being against nature. People fighting over stolen loot. Some people in the West try to get around this natural limited by artificial means. Yeah. In today's day, we've got diet pills and different, if we got two weight, I know somebody, I'm not going to mention who on my video, but they were obese and they had surgically removed all their fat, so there's many ways to deal with that. You eat a lot and then you just, have surgery or take certain kinds of pills. In order to eat as much as they desire, their desire for sense gratification is so great that it drives them to all kinds of crazy actions. In order to eat as much as they desire rather than as much as they need, they have resorted to things as shortening the lengths of their intestines so that future nutrients are absorbed from the food that they eat, or to taking pills that keep food from being digested. One of today's more popular method was quite popular in ancient Rome is well vomiting. The person eats to his fullest, induces vomiting, and then fills his belly again. So that was, what is it called? I'm trying to think of the name of it. So it was a big problem. I remember in the 80s, young teenage girls inducing themselves to vomit after they would eat. They would be super skinny because they see themselves as fat. It'll come to me again. Some people spend all day like this, eating and vomiting. Another way which people take more than their quota is by accumulating vast amounts of money and property, far more than anyone could possibly use in a single lifetime. Nelson Rockefeller, for instance, was so wealthy that he has dozens of huge houses. And in each of his houses, he had huge golden beds. This is so true. You have people who own multiple houses in different places, and they don't really live in them all. They can't live in them all at once, and the houses are $10, $100 million. They're just huge sprawls. You get lost. I remember being in the Los Altos Hills, and some of these houses, and there are people who have even bigger houses than that, but I remember I would get lost. I was trying to find the bathroom in one of these houses I was doing singing in. I was getting paid to sing in, and it was like, I was like, what? And I'd walk into a bedroom, and then the bedroom would go into another bathroom, and the bathroom would open up into another. And it reminded me of, there's a place in San Jose called the Winchester's Mystery House. If you don't know about this, you can Google it. But basically, it was a crazy lady who built her house and had people constantly building and having things where cupboards would open up into a room below, and stairwells that would go up into but anyway, that's, the point being is that people have so much stuff that they don't even really need. Nelson Rockefeller, for instance, was so wealthy that he had dozens of huge houses, and in each of his houses he had huge golden beds, but he had only one body, and so he could sleep only in one bed at a time, under the roof of one house at a time. Greedy, wealthy people also have huge bank accounts that contain far more money than they could ever really need. This is another manifestation of greed. Such hoarding runs directly counter to the teachings of the Shri Ishopanishad. Why does a person claim ownership of a thing or of another person? To control it or them. And why does he want to control it? Usually because he wants to be the enjoyer of it. For example, a child claims ownership of a piece of candy so he can control it. Why does he want to control it? So he can enjoy the taste of it. He can't enjoy the taste unless he has control over it, unless he can pick it up and put it in his mouth. To buy a piece of candy from a store is to transfer the ownership from the store to the customer. After a customer has paid for the candy, he is given control over it. He is allowed to control it until he owns it, and only then can he do with it as he pleases. If you walked into a store and started eating food off the shelves without paying for it, you might be prosecuted. You would be told you couldn't do what you wanted with the food until you became the owner of it. The owner of something is considered its rightful enjoyer. Seen in this light, the first mantra's declaration that the Supreme Lord is the ultimate owner and controller also declares him to be the ultimate rightful enjoyer of everything and everyone. So everything that exists is meant to please him. He is the center around which everything revolves. And this activity is joyful and glorious spiritual activity. So in the material concept, if you had to give everything to try to please somebody materially, that usually doesn't, people envy other people, and so they want to be the enjoyer. So we have this contamination in this material world, which doesn't apply in the spiritual world. Unfortunately, a person who is materialistic, greedy, and self-worshipping wants to take the place of God. He sees himself as the center of the universe. He sees everything and everyone, the world, people, his family, animals, plants, the environment is revolving around him. And, you know, I mean, maybe sometimes people might think, well, that's kind of extreme. I don't see myself as God. But, you know, when we see things from our perspective, and that's the reality, my family, my job, that tastes good. You know, I enjoy that, right? Or that belongs to me, or that is my daughter, or that is my dog. And so we definitely see ourselves as enjoyers of these things, or extensions of ourselves. He sees everything and everything as meant for his enjoyment. The world is full of such exploitative people, and they cause so many problems. So yeah, you have everybody trying to be Krishna, everybody trying to be the exploiter and enjoyer, the supreme enjoyer, and you've got all these living entities, just, I mean, humans alone, what's that, 8 billion people, all trying to exploit other people to see who can be on the top. I think that's going to be problematic. It is problematic, and people don't understand that this is exactly what's going on, and why we have, because we don't understand who is the real controller and enjoyer of things. If a person sees himself as a supreme enjoyer, he will automatically live a life of exploitation. He will not respect others or the environment, nor will he care for the well-beings of others. He will lead a hedonistic life of unrestricted sense enjoyment, lording over everything and everyone. And this is a very empty pursuit. The more we dig ourselves into this, the more unhappy we become. And there have been many people who've changed their life to a spiritual life because they realized that it was a completely, even though they were enjoying this hedonistic life, they were feeling more and more empty and not being connected. And it was only God that would connect them. Although a human in form, he will be no more than an animal who lives by the philosophy might makes right. However, serious students of the Shri Ishopanishad will know these truths. Number 1, I am spirit, soul, not matter. I am a spark of God. Number 2, although my essence is non-different from God's, i.e. spirit, I am not the supreme spirit. I am the dominated part and parcel of God. I am not God. Number 3, as a dominated part and parcel of the supreme spirit, my natural function is to be engaged in loving service to him. I cannot find complete happiness in material sense gratification because I am spirit, not matter. I need spiritual food, loving service to God. Since my position is dominated, I am not the supreme controller. My natural activity is to render loving service to the Supreme Lord. To try to be the Lord and enjoyer is unnatural and leads only to frustration and misery. Wonderful. So we talk about the essence, our position and our function of the living entity. To know these three is to know the absolute truth, and to apply our life will bring great happiness and avoid great suffering. On a practical level, if people lived by the first mantra of the Shri Ishopanishad, the effect would be great. These enlightened people would live as caretakers, not exploiters. Since they would see everyone as God's children, they would see the inalienable right of all God's children to partake in God's bounty. God's property is rightfully meant for the well-being and sustenance of all his children. Once individuals understand this, they will not see their private property, including their own bodies, as really theirs. They will see themselves as caretakers, not owners of God's property. They will use what is in their possession in a manner that is consistent with the absolute truth of God's ownership. It is not that individual ownership of anything and everything must be, or even could be, banned. So this is an understanding. We're not promoting communism here to say that you don't belong there, but you have to have that understanding. As children of God, each of us can possess his property and use it both for our own sustenance and for the welfare of our family, neighborhood, society, state, nation, and world. It is not that a theocracy of self-appointed servants of God should control all property. So we've seen this in both religious nations and empires, and atheistic and communist. they eventually become somebody who has to run and control these things. So they're like saying one thing out the side of their mouth and they're doing the opposite and justifying it, right? Indeed, nothing could be more dangerous and more against the meaning of the first mantra of the Shri Ishopanishad. So-called religious leaders who seek political power in order to control all properties and people deny the fact that all people are children of God, and therefore all people have the right to possess and use his property for their sustenance and in his service. There is nothing more dangerous to real religion than fanatics who seek to lord over others by force in the name of God. And we've spoken, both Bhaktivedanta and my spiritual master have spoken very sharply against what Jesus terms as those in wolves' clothing, or sheep's clothing, wolves in sheep's clothing, right? Religious people who act and dress and propound like they are religious, but in other words, they're doing things that are evil and harmful to society, or even for just are straight up materialists who are acting in the cloak of religious, or they're fanatics who are saying, you have to follow this way and you don't have a freedom of choice, to do that. Nor is false renunciation desirable. You may say, God owns everything, therefore I'm going to give up ownership of my watch. I'll throw it away. Right, we've discussed the real meaning of renunciation is to basically dovetail our life and our items in the service of Krishna. So it's not giving up things that it's going to, this is all what the Bhagavad Gita is, and Krishna was telling Arjuna. So, but how can you give up what is not yours in the first place? So you're saying, I'm going to give up, this and this and this, but actually the first mantra is telling us that we don't actually own and control those things, so we can't really give them up, To say I'm going to give up away my watch shows that you think you own the watch. Obviously, you cannot give away the watch if it wasn't yours. For example, if the watch belonged to your father, who merely lent it to you for a short while, you would not say, I'm going to give up my watch. To give up what is in one's possession, to think I'm going to give up all my things, is based on illusion of ownership. Real renunciation is different. Real renunciation means to understand that everything in your possession isn't really yours. It is God's. So, we're reading the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna was explaining to Arjuna that even the abilities that he had were things that were given to him by Krishna, and that he should use in the service of Krishna in love and devotion. So whether Arjuna, everything that happened to Arjuna, all this training, all the situations were all Krishna's mercy. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita was about, was understanding that. The practical application of this understanding is the change in use of one's things. Instead of using possessions for your sense enjoyment only, if you are enlightened, you will use them for the glorification of God and the welfare of people who are all God's children. It's very wonderful. We have a tendency to, we already have an innate ability to be of service to Krishna. So we should be also in service of our brothers and sisters around us. An individual, a family, or a government that understands this first mantra of the Shri Ishopanishad sees itself in the role of caretaker, not owner or exploiter. And that is the end of that purport. We will continue on next time with mantra 2. Thank you very much. Jai Shri Prabhupada.